Let's segue to the Israel part here around Charlie Kirk. There's been a huge dust up right now, very lately after Charlie Kirk's assassination. I want to be clear at the top that some of it is absolutely unhinged. People just outright saying shit like Israel killed Charlie Kirk. There's not a single scrap of evidence to support that. What I think is a legitimate conversation, which we're all about to have, is about the role that Charlie played in the conservative movement, the questions he was beginning to ask about Israel. He was unambiguously pro-Israel. Let's be very clear. He also was unambiguously against like Groypers and quote Jew hate, as he even told me in the segment that we did, a few weeks before that he was murdered. I want to be clear though that what has happened since, in my opinion, is disgusting, is that the Israeli government, I'm not going to denigrate pro-Israeli forces here in America. They have a right to do so because there's a lot of evidence for that. But the Israeli government itself, Benjamin Netanyahu, has had a concerted effort to claim Charlie as one of his own and to basically use his death for the political support of his country in our country. Yeah. That is what I find absolutely objectionable, and it goes deeper. This flared up in honestly a pretty crazy moment here with Tucker Carlson, who was invited to the White House for part of the tribute segment with J.D. Vance on Charlie Kirk's show. Tucker called out Bibi Netanyahu specifically and many of the donors who pressured Charlie Kirk to actually stop to keep towing the line on Israel. Here's what Tucker had to say.
That was the question. If you were good faith, you're on his team.
That is exactly right. And good faith is the measure. And I have to say, I think now is exactly the wrong time to appropriate the memory of someone and the emotion that comes with that, the really intense emotion that all of us feel at his murder, and use it for your own parochial ends. Like, he stood for this. But I don't think it's helpful for people to jump in, particularly foreign heads of state, to say, this is what, he lived for my cause or whatever. That's disgusting, actually. Don't do that. That turns everybody off. You don't help your own cause by doing that. And it's also literally untrue. It did worry me, because I think your description is perfect. He was one of the very few who took that message and stood by it. I mean, right to the very end. This cannot get bigger. We don't want another regime change war. But man, some of the people who send money to Turning Point, his donors, were very tough on him. So tough on him that I could feel it. I talked to him a lot in the last few months, and he was under enormous pressure. He never bent. He never became bitter.
He kept his integrity to the very end.
To the very end.
Very politically sensitive, I think, for the vice president to have Tucker there saying specifically about Bibi Netanyahu's basically claiming of Charlie Kirk's legacy and to bring up this donor piece. Let's stick with the donor piece, because this has now exploded into a lot of accusations. Things are flying around here. So there's an allegation now that's been made by the Gray Zone and by Candace Owens specifically about Bill Ackman and a recent conference in August in which Ackman gathered with a bunch of influencers, conservative influencers. By Ackman's account, there were approximately people with nearly 100 million followers that were in the room. There were a bunch of different events and conversations that were had at this gathering at Ackman's residence, I believe, in the Hamptons in New York. He gathered them all together for like this confab to kind of talk about. One of the things that they talked about was Israel. There is an allegation now from the Gray Zone, from Candace Owens, that Charlie was berated and lectured about Tucker Carlson's previous presence at the Students for Action Summit previously, and about some of the dissident things that Charlie had said about the state of Israel and about specifically U.S. support for Israel. So here's what Candace laid out in her show yesterday. Let's take a listen.
In the Hamptons, and he had more than one event, but he had essentially what was staged, an intervention was staged by Bill Ackman, because Charlie's rational thoughts about Israel were a no-no. This is not the route that you should be going on. And Charlie was surrounded by his friends, his quote unquote friends. Bill Ackman was very upset, and threats were made. I know it went down this way. I'm waiting for one of them to go on record and to say that it didn't go down this way. It was at this time that Bibi Netanyahu was called and Charlie was invited to Israel. This was an under duress situation, I would say, because I've been in these situations before. It felt like a threat, like not like, hey, come here and we can educate you because you're my friend. More like, this is your last chance. That's how it felt to me. I can't speak to how it felt to Charlie. And I know that Charlie was offered a ton of money in this moment, a ton of money. Bibi would fund it, you know. Charlie said no to Bibi. Okay. Bill Ackman, if you would like to dispute that, I would love to hear what you say happened, because our sources and what we have, it's solid. Okay. There were conversations that took place, messages that were sent at that time, and they are solid. But I also went out to 2 other people who were at this meeting, and nobody is willing to go on record. They're all messaging each other, trying to figure out a coordinated response to say that, no, this was all quite cordial, but no one wants to go on record and describe it as cordial because they know someone's leaking, because someone's got a guilty conscience about what happened at the Hamptons. I am inviting you guys, I will give you my platform, actually, to come clear matters up, to tell us what really happened. Because, you know, I think Charlie was definitely on the brink of changing some of his perspectives.
Okay, so that's from Candace. I want to be very clear here that Bill Ackman is disputing a lot of this. Let's put this up here on the screen. Here's what Ackman had to say. He said that this afternoon, Candace Owens slandered me, accusing of staging an intervention. He lays out specifically everything that I did about the conference, about the gathering that happened. What he says is that he had an initial Zoom with Charlie. The agenda for the meeting that he took place in was the economic future of America, the cultural landscape of dating and marriage, the convergence of East and West, Mamdani, the new threat to America. And what we see, actually, again, with what we see with Bill Ackman's tweet broadly is he's disputing that there was any sort of confrontation, intervention, and all of that. I will also note that Charlie's former producer has said that he does not believe that that account is accurate.
I have that if you want me to read it.
Yeah, go ahead, please.
So this is from former producer Andrew Colvett.
Yeah.
I've been asked about the Bill Ackman event more than a few times now, so I asked our staff who were traveling with Charlie to find out what's true, what's not. And his team was with him 100% of the time when he wasn't in his hotel room. Here's what they told me, quote, Bill never yelled at Charlie, never pressed him on Bibi, never gave him a list of Charlie's offenses against Israel. There was concern raised about having Tucker at SAS. We don't believe this came from Bill. And Charlie's reply was, quote, honestly, people telling me not to have Tucker makes me want to have Tucker, and I'm going to lock him in for AM Fest too. Charlie personally told me he had a very cordial relationship with Bill and the event was productive. Those are the facts.
Yes. Okay.
So he does confirm there was some sort of something said about upset expressed over Tucker being at this previous Turning Points event.
It fits also with, there was a podcast that was recorded with Megyn Kelly right around this time where Charlie said effectively something to effect of, I feel like I can criticize my own government with more ease than I can fit the Israeli government.
What he said is actually, I misquoted this the other day. What he said is that he feels like Israelis can criticize the Israeli government more than he can.
That's right.
And that was crazy to him. That's
accurate, by the way.
Yeah, that it is accurate.
Yeah.
that you know, he felt this constrained. And the other thing is, like, I don't know what happened in the Hamptons. There's a couple things I will say when it comes to these type of like billionaire donors. It doesn't normally, like, the pressure doesn't have to be so overt. Charlie's a sophisticated actor in this space.
Absolutely. And by the way, he acknowledged so much of this publicly.
Right. A big part of his role is fundraising and donor maintenance. As the head of a large organization that receives a lot of like wealthy, high net worth individual backing, that is a large part of what he would be doing. So you don't need them to yell at you to know what they want you to do. You don't need like direct, overt blackmail threats, et cetera. You know, there could be much more subtle indications of like, oh, you know, if Tucker isn't at the next event, then I think I have some donors I could bring in. I think I have some money that could go. I'm not saying that's what happened. I'm just saying that's the way these things typically work because everyone knows the game. You don't need, if you're Charlie Kirk, you're a smart person, you don't need anyone to blatantly tell you, we want you to be towing the line 100%. You think he doesn't know that? Of course he knew that. Of course he knew that. And then to your point, Saagar, a good bit of this was out in public. Laura Loomer was going after Charlie Kirk aggressively. She's now since, I think, deleted a bunch of her tweets over this. But if you put B7 up on the screen, Laura Loomer was attacking him. There were tons of pro-Israel conservatives who were going after him for hosting not only Tucker, but Dave Smith for a debate on Zionism there. She said, I don't ever want to hear Charlie Kirk claim he is pro-Trump ever again after this weekend. I'd say he's revealed himself as a political opportunist. I've had a front row seat to witness the mental gymnastics these last 10 years. Lately, Charlie's decided to behave like a charlatan, claiming to be pro-Trump one day while he stabs Trump in the back the next. There was a lot of upset about the Dave Smith debate and about Tucker being at that event specifically. And a lot of that was public. So I have zero doubt that he was feeling a squeeze. And we discussed this previously as well. Even before his killing, he was feeling a squeeze between my primary role is to back up this administration. If you doubt that that's the case, just see, J.D. Vance taking over, the vice president of the United States taking over his podcast, after he's killed. His primary role is to back up this administration. However, since he's supposed to be a voice for these young people, and you see organically young people across the board, including young Republicans, saying, what are we doing? How is this America first? He was feeling very pressured between the support of the administration, the need to keep his donors on board, and being able to keep his, young base from fleeing to other influencers like a Nick Fuentes or like a Candace Owens. He was obviously feeling that pressure and trying to figure out how to navigate that space. So that's why he had you on. That's why he allowed Tucker and Dave Smith to be at his event. He wasn't going to say it, but so he's sort of creating plausible deniability for himself, but he would let these other people in to say it. That's why he had that youth focus group on Israel which we covered, which again was a way for him he's not going to be the one to say it, but at least he's allowing these voices to be out there and be given representation on his platform.
Exactly right. Very, very well said. And that's why I started the way that we did, is that a lot of this is being thrown around of, oh, Israel killed. Listen, the controversy to me is the way that the Bibi Netanyahu government is trying to claim Charlie Kirk. And I want to be very clear to the extent that they did. He appeared on Fox News twice, almost in the immediate aftermath of Charlie's death, to celebrate him as a great friend of Israel. Nobody asked you, by the way. You could have just said our condolences to the family. And instead, it was all about how he was a great warrior for Bibi's cause. Take a listen to that.
He was a defender of our common Judeo-Christian civilization. He was unbelievably excited to walk in the footsteps of Jesus here. He valued our bond, the bond between America and Israel. He did so many things to defend free speech. He had his truth. He stood up for it. But he said, you can come and debate me. He invited that debate. He certainly didn't invite the violence, the horrible violence that tried to silence him. And, this is a worldwide problem. The people on the extremes, the Islamists, the radical Islamists, and their union with the ultra-progressives, they often speak about human rights. They speak about free speech, but they use violence to try to take down their enemies.
Yeah, I mean, this was like nonstop, literally. It was Bibi Netanyahu, Ben Gvir. These are ministers of the Israeli government. And we had
also tried to assert, before we knew anything about anything,
that it was a radical
the killer
Islamist.
was an Islamist.
Right.
Just trying to will that into being because it serves his ends of making people hate Muslims more. I mean, it's just I want people to really take a second. Imagine it was literally any other foreign head of state.
Totally.
How bizarre. It's just, it's bizarre. It's inappropriate. It's uncouth. I mean, it's just gross and I've seen people do this with other, figures who have passed away. I've actually seen people do this with regard to Michael Brooks, who obviously is a much less famous figure who died prematurely. And people will take him, well, Michael Brooks would have said this about X, or he thought this about Y. And if you aren't just going based on literally what he said, I find it absolutely. It's really gross and uncomfortable when people take a deceased figure and try to use them and weaponize them for their own political cause, let alone when it's a head of state who is perpetrating a genocide and using our taxpayer dollars and, manipulating our government. I mean, not that Trump doesn't have his own agency in all of this as well, but it's so sick and unseemly, especially. And that's why this piece about the tensions that were playing out within Charlie, who, you were saying, I think this is the right, like, you should look at Charlie as sort of like a politician trying to manage these various coalitions, right? And so some of this was bubbling to the surface. And for you to dishonestly claim that there was no tension there, that he was just a defender 100% of everything you're doing, including especially your war on Iran, which he was very public about opposing. It's just incredibly gross and dishonest, and should be absolutely, anyone of good faith should say this is wildly inappropriate.
Yes, that is what I really want to bring this to. And that's what I think that the controversy is about, is that look, he was the best to do it. He was the coalitional manager. He was the person able to be with the pro-Israel forces and the skeptical Israel forces. Something like that's not going to be seen again. And that's why, to me, the scandal, and to the extent that there should be debate afterwards, it should be about the people who are, quote, trying to claim his legacy. Now, I'm not part of it, the institutional right or any of these people. I'm just an observer. But that's why people are attacking Candace and Tucker and saying it's disgusting the way that they're trying to use his legacy for their political ends. Look at what you are doing. The Israeli prime minister is on television saying he was one of us.
Yeah.
Guys, that is the most blatant example of trying to appropriate his death for their domestic political war aims. It's sick. And it's like the people who object to that are they're the troublemakers. It's unbelievable, really, to watch. Also, I want everybody to flag that Bill Ackman just openly admits to a confab of gathering 100 million people. Influencers with collectively over 100 million followers. Everyone sit with that. And everyone sit with that in particular in who you're getting your news from. And if they're not very explicit about the stuff that they take money from and who they don't, all right? We are on record of exactly every dollar that comes to this company. Not one of it comes from some Bill Ackman. Neither of us are going on any trips except in free flights. When people invite me and it's, I'll cover your travel. No, you won't. If I want to go, I'm going to go on my own dime, specifically to avoid this type of stuff.
Absolutely.
And I admit it. It's sometimes embarrassing. We talked about billionaires. I'll be like, yeah, I had dinner with him before. I'll tell you that. You think that's to my benefit? You think that it doesn't, lead to conspiracy theory and all that? I say it anyways, specifically to avoid types of conflict of interest. So if people are doing this type of bullshit and they're not disclosing it, you should not trust them for 1 second. So please sit with that, because it's not just about Israel. There's a whole bunch of stuff going on behind the scenes. And yeah, the people who are not being honest with you, they rely on not asking questions. So with that, let's get to Venezuela. Hey, if you like that video, hit the like button or leave a comment below. It really helps get the show to more people.
And if you'd like to get the full show ad-free and in your inbox every morning, you can sign up at breakingpoints.com.
That's right. Get the full show, help support the future of independent media at breakingpoints.com.